Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Hess from Avondale Estates PD in Georgia. He has 20 years experience in law enforcement. Really looking forward to having him today. So welcome, Chief Hess. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of a shout out because I know you've been in this career for 20 years, but you were also just elected as the fourth vice president for the Georgia Police Chief Association. And when we first talked, you were running. And then today, when we connected, you said that you have officially been elected. So, congratulations.
Thank you very much. It was a long 14 months of campaigning and never thought I would get into politics, but I feel like I've got a taste now.
I love it. No, that's a huge accomplishment. So, congratulations. And for anyone who's listening, I was hoping you could give us a little bit of background into you, what the last 20 years have looked like and what keeps you motivated and passionate to still be in this career 20 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Harry. That's what I go by. I'm a firm believer that titles are appropriate when necessary, but probably 80% of the time, titles don't really aren't appropriate for the conversation.
Mm.
As you stated, I've been in law enforcement 20 years with four different municipalities in the state of Georgia. All of them are relatively small, but what makes me me is my family. My wife and my children come first. That's what really pushes me to excel. And, just the family atmosphere of a small department is much easier to accomplish than larger departments from what I've seen. And I really push that family comes first, no matter what. Family will always be there, but the countless number of holidays, birthdays, events that we miss because of the profession we've chosen. So I really try to foster that family atmosphere within the agency and be active with the family. So
Do you know what's really interesting? And I don't know if you felt this, and I've been told because of my past experiences in my childhood that I'm pretty good at reading body language. I think it's something
mhm,
that I had to do, like growing up in a toxic environment.
mhm.
And I kind of saw you wiggle a little bit when I was giving the intro and I said Chief Hess. Like I saw like a little bit of that. And so for you to be like, it's Harry, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
it makes total sense that you're like, hey, just call me Harry. And
yeah.
I,
And
I
that's
appreciate that.
no, absolutely. One of the things I push to is humanizing the badge. I know the term's been thrown around, but
Yeah.
you know, to better humanize the badge is we're not officers, not our first name, or chief or deputy chief. It's your first name given at birth is your name. That's how you should introduce yourself to people.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I also think it takes a lot of self-assessment. Kind of that intro that you just gave to me was really interesting because it's like who are we outside of what we do and what is important to us? What fills us up? What keeps us going? What is truly valuable in our lives? And sometimes I think we get so attached to that title or we get so attached to what we do that we lose who we are along the way. And I'm definitely guilty of that. And so to have that conversation of, hey, this is me. Like, I understand that, I have this title and that's valuable. Like, for me, like, I'm proud of the things that I've done in my career and I have my own titles within my company. But I agree with you. I would so much rather someone be like, hey, Paige, than
Yeah,
like, you know, but also, I think it gives us that permission to be human and to understand who we are beneath the surface.
absolutely. I mean, I talk about my wife and my kids every chance I get. I'm super proud of them. And they're my world. And I want to make sure that I am doing something to help further the law enforcement career to where the personas and everything else that is out there now about law enforcement isn't present, and we are a much better profession years to come for my children,
Mm,
and all the children in the world for that matter. But you know, I was that guy at one point where I was hung up on title. When I got my three stripes and when I first got promoted to sergeant, it was, you're going to address me as Sergeant Hess. And that was to my subordinates who a week prior, I was no different than them. But that was the I guess, the mentality within that agency or what I was brought up with my previous supervisors that they were title heavy supervisors, but quickly learned that the title doesn't make you a sergeant, a lieutenant, a chief. That's just a title. That's temporary. It's who you are as a person, as a leader, that you can get your people together and go forth and conquer anything that may be thrown at you.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to dive into with what you just said, but my first question is, we talk about why a lot and, connecting to your why to have that longevity, to have that, I hate to say motivation because sometimes that's fleeting, but I think that it's appropriate in this context of like that is what is keeping you going, right? That is what's motivating you to take the next step. Do you think that your why is your family?
It's a large part.
Yeah.
The why for me as a person is always my family.
Mhm.
The why for me as a police officer in the position I'm in now is more development, mentorship, and at this stage of my career, I want to be able to have prepared the department for succession.
Yeah.
When I was up at SPI at University of Louisville for 13 weeks, and my wife stood behind me with that, which I was shocked. That was a lot, but one of the professors, made a statement, and I'd heard it before, but he really drilled it home that our seats are temporary. You know, the seat I'm in right now as chief of police, I don't own that seat. It doesn't disappear when I retire or I go somewhere else. That seat will always have to be filled by somebody else. It's what I'm doing to prepare that next side, the next generation to come up, or order of succession to come up to where it's easy. A lot of departments go outside for chief's job specifically. And, I'm a product of that. Avondale Estates went outside their agency when I was appointed chief and did a whole assessment. But you see it so much, it kind of, when you get to a certain position and rank, you know that you've plateaued.
Mm.
Why can't we keep that internal? My deputy chief, I'm working with him now, a lot of just being prepared. I want it when I leave, I want him to be able to just slide right into this seat, like nothing happened, and the agency still keep moving forward.
Yeah, I really agree with that mentality. And, I've had to do that within myself too, of like, I hope that I can have people who are better than me one day. Like, I hope that, I have the time and the tools and the resources and the leadership skills to be able to bring other people up. And I think sometimes, and what I've experienced in my life is sometimes when you do kind of reach the top, you try so hard to like hold yourself there. It's like you don't want anyone else around because you don't want to be replaced, So this idea of like, how can we uplift everybody and one day hope that someone who does replace us is not only qualified, but in some ways maybe better than we were. And I think that's the best bet, right? And one of the things you said to me offline, and you kind of said this earlier, was that, the three stripes don't make you a leader. And I would really like your insights on leadership. What do you think makes a good leader, and how did you develop yourself over time to be in a leadership position?
So to start with, how I developed myself was I used the term, my first FTO told me, be a sponge. You absorb everything in by all your training officers, all your supervisors. And then when you get your time and you're by yourself, you squeeze that sponge out. You're going to let go of all the negative or the bad things that you don't think fit your personality, keep all the good stuff you've learned. Um, so that's how I've kind of built my leadership. Just like everyone else, I'm sure we've had great leaders, we've had great supervisors, great chiefs that I've worked under, but I've also had some not so great supervisors or leaders that, you know, seeing that actually drove me to put in to be a sergeant was I was seeing that there were a couple of supervisors at my department at the time, um, at that department that were just not cutting it. No one wanted to work on their shift. They weren't building up their officers. That's part of the reason why I put in. I wanted to change the culture or attempt to change the culture, but also just you know, keep being me. Yes, I've got more responsibilities. You guys have to listen to me to a certain extent, but really I wanted to foster more learning within the shifts. And that's why I put in for, initially being put in for sergeant. As time went on and moving up the ranks, taking different leadership training classes, opened my eyes to a lot of things, reading different books. But, you got to kind of feel it out because what worked at one department or for one supervisor may not work for your department in your current role. But one of the biggest things I took away from one of my trainings is that reverse hierarchy mentality, where you got the traditional corporate pyramid where the CEO sits at the top and then it kind of trickles out. Flip it upside down. As a leader of an organization, you should be working for your line level officers. You should be working for your line level supervisors, your command staff. You've got to be pulling those strings to make that department effective and efficient. And the only way you can do that is when you're working your way up again. We started off low. You want to climb the ladder. Um, but now when we're up there, it flips upside down. You're still trying to work for other people.
Mm. One of the things, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but one of the things that I think is a superpower is the ability to be a learner, to have a learner's mindset. And I really think that, and I know that this is like that like weird V word, but I think that to be a learner, it takes a lot of vulnerability, to say like I am new at this. I'm learning it. I don't really know it yet. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to put in that effort. It's kind of the opposite of standing like you said at the top saying I know everything. It's kind of starting at ground zero and being like, I don't really know this, but I'm willing to learn and I'm putting in the effort to learn. And I do think that that takes a certain level of vulnerability to do that, because no one wants to feel like they suck at something or that they're new at something, right? Especially when you reach a certain point in your career. I think everyone likes to be like, I made it, and I'm all knowing. But one of the things that my mentor taught me really early on is that you are never going to know everything. There's always room for development and advancement in your career, but also in your personal life. And it takes that, again, that self-assessment to understand maybe where are those weaknesses, and I'll say that kind of like in quotes, but where are the weaknesses? Where are those opportunities where we can improve ourselves in areas that maybe we don't know? And another thing he told me is if someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, having that vulnerability and that ability to say, I don't know. Let me find out. Let me see if I can figure it out rather than being like, pretending to know everything. And so I know that education has been something that's been really important in your life. And you said that you went and you got a degree. Is that right? Was I?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was a back to school as an adult learner um in my 30s. I started off out of high school. I was athletic. I played basketball. I went to a small South Georgia college on a basketball scholarship, burned out, came back home, tried the technical college route. I'll be the first one to admit I was like a 6 year sophomore in college, bouncing around, living my 20s, so to speak. And it wasn't until right after I was first promoted to sergeant, we had a new chief, and I'm going to name him Chris Lighty for the City of Mara Police Department. He is probably the one person that really kickstarted me in the administrative path.
Mhm.
When he came in, he developed a Office of Professional Standards. Went over there, I was over training, state certification, a number of other tasks. But he came to me one day and he goes, "Where are you at in your college degree?" I said, "What do you? It's on pause." And he goes, "Okay, well, you're getting tuition reimbursement from the city." I said, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "You are now. You have a month to enroll in a college and get your degree." Really jump started me. Enrolled. I've got a degree in psychology. Graduated with honors. I'm proud of that. Psychology also kind of going back a little bit. When I was messing around my first couple years in college, I started taking some psychology classes, and I had a professor an intro to psychology. We did some things, and he pulled me aside and he goes, "You're going to be a cop one day." And I laughed in his face. It wasn't even on my horizon. It didn't interest me. I didn't really know what I want to be. He goes, "No, you're going to be a cop one day." And he kind of, I guess that's what little light bulb went off and kind of carried with me for a couple of years. But went back, got my degree in my 30s. There were some struggles, things had changed, and being an online adult learner was very different for me. But that really, like you said before, I had to be vulnerable to that stuff to really pursue it. And then over the years, taking advanced training, and then I had the a great opportunity by my last chief, another huge mentor of mine, Chris Hudson. She allowed me to go to SBI, one of the national academies at University of Louisville for 13 weeks. And that was a challenge also. That was on a college campus, and things have really changed, from what I was used to. But for 13 weeks away from my family, 8-hour drive, it wasn't anything quick if an emergency happened. But being vulnerable and putting yourself out there, and also taking the opportunities as they come. And that's one thing I tell a lot of people. You got to take opportunities that as they come, even if it may not be a path that you want originally, you just don't know what the full circle of life is going to be, where you're going to end up.
Yeah. And I know you talked a lot about, well, first I wanted to kind of call out, you say 30 like it's so old, and I was like, oh, like dagger. You know.
Well, not
But
an
I
insult.
I
It was a
I
struggle for
I
me.
completely understand. And I think, this conversation of legacy comes up a lot, like how do we want to be remembered? How do we want to live our lives? What are the things that we want to accomplish in our lives? And I love that you called out your mentors and you called them out by name, because how powerful is that? Because I'm sure in those moments they weren't looking for that, right? Like they weren't sitting here like, well, I'm gonna push him to go to college and
Yeah.
further his education so that one day he's on a podcast and he like says my name. It's these selfless acts of truly genuinely wanting to help people and wanting to build people up that creates that like quote unquote legacy. It's the things that you do when, they have that saying of like when no one's watching or when you're not looking for
Yeah.
those accolades. So I really appreciate you shouting them out. And I think that we all have the ability to do that. We all have the ability to show up for each other and to support each other and encourage each other to grow. And I know that you said that education really helped you with leadership, but how do you think that, furthering your education and saying yes to certain opportunities and having that growth mindset helped you in your wellness? Because I know that you spent a large part of your career in traffic, and we
Yeah.
talk a lot about burnout. And, there's different cycles that everyone tells me. Sometimes it's 3 to 5 years, sometimes it's like 7 to 8 years. And how do you think that by continuing to learn, continuing to educate yourself, continuing to take different opportunities, how do you think that helped you to sustain and have longevity throughout your career from a wellness perspective?
It, I think the learning, trying new things, kind of keeps your brain sharp.
Mm.
The laws are ever changing. I mean, to look back at some of the laws that were on the books 20 years ago and how they've changed over the years, and everything else, you've really got to stay on top of that. Case laws coming out. No one loves to read case laws. I'll be the first one to admit that. But you don't have to formally go to school for the education side of things. You can stay on top of your case laws. You can read books. You can do your annual training and stuff, and staying fresh on that is super important. As you mentioned, I spent a good bit of my career attached to a traffic unit, DUI task force, heat unit. I was an accident reconstructionist. Going to simply just going to monthly meetings, you're learning new stuff. A lot of people, when I say you've got to have the education, they think I'm talking about the formal degrees and everything else. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I've met people with PhDs that are not the sharpest people and sharpest tool in the shed by any means. And I've met some of the smartest people only have a GED. And so does the formal education count? It does. It absolutely does. And I think finishing something you start with a college degree is a huge um, pat on your back. And it, like with me, I only have a bachelor's degree. I'm exploring master's programs now, but I'm exploring it to fit what I see in my next 5 to 10 years. My 5 to 10 year goals. What do I need to do to give me that edge? But you've got to stay sharp. If you're not sharp, you're going to get complacent, and complacency is what kills officers, what injures officers. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I've been in the complacency part of the repetition of going out on the interstate, writing tickets. That's all I do for a 12-hour shift. And you've got to have that self-awareness of, wait a minute, I just finished a traffic stop and don't really recall it. It's kind of like when you're driving to the house, when you get about 5 minutes from your house, you kind of forget, did I stop at the stop sign? It's not because you're tired, it's the repetitions. And so what I used to do with my traffic unit would be, and this, I was not a supervisor. I was just a regular line level officer within the traffic unit. My supervisor at the time, he was good about saying, okay, he would see it in us, pull us aside and say, okay, we're off the interstate. Let's just go ride neighborhoods. Let's do something different. Let's pick
Mhm.
up some calls for service for the patrol division and give them a break and let them go play, so to speak, and work traffic. And that's what keeps you sharp and keeps you on your toes. Because complacency, when you realize that you've got to change it, you've got to break the complacency 100% of the time, or else something bad's going to happen. And I've seen it, unfortunately, firsthand. And I've come close, simply doing a traffic stop and stepping out to the interstate because you're just not aware of your surroundings. And you've got to mix things up with all that.
Yeah. You know, what I heard and what you explained earlier about like, hey, let's switch it up. It's called a pattern disruptor. Have you heard of
Mhm.
this? Right?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is, right? It's like you're kind of like disrupting that, like you said, repetition, that like monotony of doing the same things over and over and over again. And it's like that kind of like wake up where you're like, oh, like this is different. Okay, so it kind of disrupts that pattern that you're in, and it is really important. And I love that you related it to the safety of your career. I
Mhm.
think we could also take that same explanation of like complacency and stagnation and that repetition into our personal lives and into our own personal wellness as well. I think that we all get into our routines where like it's just what we do, right? It's
Mhm.
like, and in some ways, having discipline and consistency can be really good. Like this could be like, hey, maybe you have a workout plan that you're really regimented and you go and you do it and you meditate every morning or whatever it is that you do. And those could be really positive. But I think more times than not, like we kind of get stuck in like, okay, we're just gonna like lay on the couch and we're gonna,
Yep.
maybe not eat very well. And so if we can start introducing some of those pattern disruptors into our personal lives too, and take those like zoom out moments of like, hey, let's pause and see like, is this positive? Is it safe? Is it healthy? And then if the answer is no, then what can we do to switch things up and do things that are going to help us to get back on either a healthier path or a safer path, or maybe a new path. Maybe it's something that we
Yep.
have to kind of forge for ourselves. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And one of the things that you said was, a couple times was this like relatability of like, hey, I found myself in this too. What in the context of wellness, how has this career impacted your personal wellness? We hear a lot about, the stress and what it can do to you physically and mentally, and I would love your perspective on this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, 20 years. We just had our Chiefs conference last week, and I'm talked to several chiefs that have been chiefs. They've in it 30, 40 years. At 20 years, it is worn on me, personally, mentally, physically. And the one thing I'll be the first one to tell you is I have not taken care of myself physically the way I should have over the years. And it's resulted in, I'm currently with my current knee injury. There's ways that I should have been taking care of myself physically, but more importantly, the mental wear is where I see it really affecting me over the years, as well as other officers. And, mental health, mental wellness is a huge thing in the state of Georgia as well as across the nation. And I take it very seriously. You know, if I've got to send an officer for fitness for duty, it's not a punishment. And it's hard to tell an officer that I want to get you back better than you were before wherever you're at this point. And I've had to do it a couple of times, and the officers, you can see in their expression, when I say you're going for fitness for duty, psychological, they think then the game's over. Their
Mm,
career's done. And like I explained to them, I'm a firm believer. I'd rather get you back to where you were before whatever's going on, even better than that with this. And
yeah.
it's worked out both ways. I'm a firm believer, and what I tell a lot of people too is really and truly, at least quarterly, you've got to go speak with somebody. And that is just a listening session with a professional and just get everything out. I try to go at least quarterly. Sometimes I go more often, and I'm not afraid to say it. The stigma does not affect me. I think the stigma's changed over the years, thank God. 20 years ago, it was suck it up, buttercup, and, throw some sand on it, let's go. And now it's a real thing. They're finally recognizing that the trauma that we experience um, throughout even a short career, what we experience in a year is more traumatic than what a normal citizen experiences in a lifetime. Depending on where you are, the calls for service, the things you see, and we've got to do better about getting ahead of that kind of stuff. Wellness programs. We've partnered recently with an app that is 100% anonymous, and they're nothing is saved, but it gives you resources. It gives your family resources, which I feel like is more important, as well as because my wife will tell you, she knows when I have a bad day. But early in our relationship, she didn't know how to deal with it. She could see manifestations in me when I come home after a traumatic event or something like that. But how does she, sorry about that. How does she, how does she relate to me as a layperson, as a civilian that doesn't understand the things that we see and do throughout a year, let alone a 20-year career? And we've got to really focus on that. And I think the mental health is key, but also the physical health. We've got to figure a way to keep everyone healthy because you mentioned it before. I want to be able to hit a retirement age, draw a pension, and not have to work and enjoy years of retirement with my wife and my kids and hopefully grandkids. And heck, who even knows, great grandkids for that matter. I don't want to get to the point of retirement and within a year or 5 years, I'm 6 feet under, you know.
Yeah.
So we really focusing on physical and mental wellness is going to be key.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had a lot of conversation about trying to identify why wellness is important. And I think that it's so individualized and it changes throughout your life. What you care about when you're 20 is going to be so different when you're 50. When you're earlier in your career and you have a whole life ahead of you and
Mhm.
you never think you're going to be 50, and then when you're preparing for retirement, things are going to change. And the really interesting thing that I have found through all the conversations with everyone, all ages, different walks of life, different states, there's always a core objective of longevity. And why you want that longevity is different, right? Some people are like family, or, I want to have a long career, or I want to have a long and successful retirement, whatever that
Mhm.
looks like. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in some of the words that we use. And I did this too, where I like forever was like longevity, longevity, longevity. And then I had to sit down and say, well, what does that mean? What is longevity? What does that mean? And I think that we have to do exactly what you just said. We have to raise the bar because what is the point of living long if you don't live well? What is the point of having a really long career if you are suffering through it the entire
Mhm.
time? What is the point of having a long retirement if you can't move? Or if mentally you're not good, or if you don't know your family anymore, you know? And so I think if we can say, okay, yes, of course, like we want you to have a long career. We want you to have a long retirement, but we want you to live it really well. Like we want you to
No,
feel good, you know? And of course, like injuries are going to happen. It's never going to be injury elimination. There's always going to be room for mental health crisis and things that happen. Like that's going to happen, but how can we be more proactive? How can we try to reduce the risk of some of these things happening? And so we have those proactive and reactive resources so that we can raise that bar and you can have a long and successful and happier
yeah,
life, you know, and feel good. And I've been saying this recently because this is what I envision. Like when I get to the end of this life, like I envision myself as an old lady, which is really scary. But I see myself as this old lady and I'm like power walking to the finish line. Like I don't want
no,
to be like crawling or wheeled to the finish line. Like I
no,
want to be like on my feet power walking, like, you know, peace out everyone, you know, on my own terms. And so how can we get there? You know, what are the
yeah.
things that we can do proactively? And so I really appreciate you saying that. And I know that organizationally, you guys are really focusing on that. You know, how can you get the education and the resources and the information out there, not just for, um, the younger generation, which we know that's important. It's a good
Mm.
place
Oh
to
yeah.
start, but for everyone so that they know that they're supported.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got to, with me, I'm 45. I'm not saying I'm old by any means, even though I've got more gray now than I ever have. But y the generation coming into law enforcement is really, they really keep me on my toes, and I want to caveat that in a good way
Mm,
because I'm having to learn different generations and what drives them, what pushes them, and then you may have that wild card person from one generation that thinks like someone much older.
mm,
Um, but that's kind of like where I kind of broke it down and telling everyone within our city, community will always come first. We've got kind of three core driving factors: community, leadership, and technology.
mm,
So community, engaging with the community obviously is no brainer. But the leadership stuff, preparing the leadership for the secession in the future. But the technology part of it is, I've got to go out on a limb sometimes with some of the technology, but if it works, it works. And I feel like the wellness, this app that we got, it's a simple app, and but the resources that's provided to them through this app that the younger guys jumped right on, and
mm.
it was someone like me that took me a while to get kind of, I slow rolled into it because I was kind of leery.
Sure.
But now it's great. It's great for my wife. It's great for me, and I really feel like this next generation of police leaders and just police officers in general are really going to push us technologically so much further and really keep us on our toes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting. I kind of find myself in the middle, of all of it, and I'm trying to keep up as well with everything. But I think it's a really good leadership skill to have to be able to identify that, to have an open mind. And I've talked about this before. I actually really give you guys a lot of credit that kind of came up in the quote unquote like older generation, of the rub dirt on it, suck it up, like that kind of mentality. And now everyone who's in leadership roles is, I don't want to say forced. I think you're put in the position to adapt and to have an open mind and to consider different ways of doing things or different ways of learning, or like you said, different technologies. And that's not an easy thing to do. I think as we get older, we kind of do just inherently get stuck in our own way or our own tracks of doing things. But as a leader, to say, you know what, like I did come up in this environment. This was the way that I was, raised or taught how to do these things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only way. And if I want to prepare the younger generation, I have to relate to them and I have to see what motivates them. And then we have to provide the resources that they're going to utilize because at the end of the day, if people don't use it, then it's not benefiting anyone. So how can we find the things that are going to be relatable to
Yeah.
and that's hard. Like you said, you're dealing with multi-generations, and so
Yeah.
that's challenging. But
But
um,
I mean, that's also why, like in my agency, I'm a firm believer in this. Everyone has a voice. What I tell
yeah.
them is, you know, if you have an idea or you see something new on the market that could make us more effective and efficient, then bring it up.
Hmm.
You know, we can at least try it. I mean, most companies will give you a test and evaluation period of a software or whatever it may be, equipment. Let me get that in there. Let's test it out. And if it fails, I'll take the licks. We tried it. But if it succeeds, your name's going to be out there. It was your idea. I will help you. Let's try things. And it's actually paid dividends with us. You know, we've tried different softwares. Some of it's worked, some of it's like, no, not this isn't for us.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like if you have an idea, own it, bring it up, and let's try it. If we don't try it, we will never know. So I'm a big proponent of everyone has a voice. We'll try different things. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll just keep on trucking down the road.
Yeah. I know that Georgia is actually, and it was really interesting. I didn't know this before, but I've had a few conversations with other leaders in your state, and I understand that Georgia really is prioritizing wellness, as a
Mhm.
whole. And what are you seeing as still maybe the biggest challenge with law enforcement wellness as a whole?
Um, it it's hard to say there's one specific challenge. Um, there's departments that are really succeeding with like the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a big thing here in Georgia now. There's departments that mandate it for every one of their officers. Doesn't matter if you want to or not, you're going, and it's paid off. There's other departments that they may have funding issues. You know, with me being a very small department, trying to get funding for a department-wide BJJ training course has been difficult. Hopefully, 26, we're going to be able to start something. But then you get some resistance. People are like, I don't want to go roll around on a mat. I'm going to get hurt.
Mm,
Well, it's going to pay dividends. Just try it once. Um, the other thing is, our academy standards just went up this year. We basically doubled our basic mandate from roughly 3 months to almost 6 months now. But in that, they're really pushing the physical well-being for that extended period. The officers are going through officer resiliency, which is a mental health, getting the head left of the boom
mm,
type mentality. So on the state level, we're doing great. I think the challenges that we still have are funding, depending on department sides, and buy-in with some things. We're law enforcement in general, it's full of alpha males and females, which isn't a bad thing by any means. But over the years, you get stuck in your own ways. You don't want to try different things. And you see that I've seen that more after like the 5 to 10 year mark. It's kind of like you're
mm,
stuck in your old habits. And I was that way too, but you've got to have someone to push you. And I think that's where leadership plays a huge role. We've done better. I think we've destigmatized the mental health side of things over the last 2 or 3 years in a good way. But I think there is still an internal stigma with a lot of people
mm.
to not come forward and say, look, I'm having suicidal thoughts, or look, I need help and the resources are there. And unfortunately, it happens multiple every year. We lose more officers to suicide over the last 2 years than we have anything else. We've got to do better with the mental health side of things because if you're mentally healthy, that means that's going to correlate, in my opinion, to your physical health, your personal health, your work health. Everything's going to run off that mental health.
Thank you. My final question, and I think this really segues nicely, is in the context of wellness, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's maybe earlier in their career? Something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way?
No, you know, not this profession's not built for everybody by any means. But if you want to be successful in it, maintain the mental healthness, your sharpness, maintain the physical healthness. If you're physically healthy, you're going to be successful and be safe. Um, don't go for the late night hot dogs at Quick Trip and energy drinks, which I'm guilty of. But that your mental and physical health have to come first. If those are there, everything's going to come full circle. Your personal life, your work life is going to be healthy. Find someone that you look up to that's willing to take you under their wing. And there's plenty out there. They may not come out like really quick and everything else, but find someone and listen. Listen to what they have to say and always put yourself out there. You never know what opportunity is going to pay dividends and if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to know. You know, that's the biggest thing. Put yourself out there, be mentally and physically healthy, stay sharp, and watch out for complacency. It would be my, you know, final big advice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time coming on here and sharing your insights and your experience. And if there's anything I miss, if you want to add anything, I'll give you the floor.
No, just big thing is family. Family will always be there. I'm a huge proponent of family. Never turn your back on your family. Always be there for them through the thick and thin. You know, this is a career, yes, but family will always come first. So make sure you're keeping your family first and foremost and putting them up on that pedestal that they deserve to be in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course.